This is Talking Drupal, a bi-weekly chat about web design and development by a group of guys with the one thing in common. We love Drupal. We record this on Wednesday afternoons in a Google Hangout. Visit us at talkingdrupal.com. Today is episode 98, July 1st, 2015. Today we're talking about Drupal.org. Welcome, guys.
Good afternoon.
So we're into July, halfway through the year almost, huh? Or no, exactly halfway through the year.
Pretty much.
Hard to believe, huh? And we're creeping up to episode 100, which will be 4 weeks from today.
Looking forward to it.
Yeah, hard to believe, huh? That much time has passed by. So as usual, we have John Picozzi from Oomph joining us. Welcome, John.
Good afternoon, Internet friends.
What's new with you, John? Anything?
No, I'm enjoying the warm weather. I can wear T-shirts more liberally now because it's not snowing. So just enjoying summer, really.
Oh, that's great. Good for you. And Nick Laughlin joining us from the lovely Worcester, Massachusetts.
Good afternoon. How you doing? Yeah. Actually, I was down your way this weekend. I was down in Providence celebrating my birthday and going back and forth between Providence and Boston. So it's good to stop by and say hi. And looking forward to today's talk. I use Drupal.org all the time, but it's good to hear somebody from the back end and hear how things work.
There you go, Josh. Mitchell is joining us, and his intro is someone from the back end. So, welcome, Josh.
I don't know how I feel about that. Yeah. So I'm happy to have a conversation about Drupal.org and how we go about prioritizing the work there, the features that we have on the roadmap. I'm an open book. You guys can ask me just about anything.
Great. So for a more proper introduction to Josh, he is the CTO of the Drupal Association, is carried that role since March of 2014. So one question that will be interesting somewhere in today, if we can get to, is what is his impressions, a little after a year after starting that job. I'd be interested to hear that. He's also held titles as application manager, director of platform services, director of project management, and positions like that. So he's been around the block here. He spent 7 years also as a freelance designer and developer. So he sits or has been in the place that many of us are sitting in as freelance developers. So in addition to his Drupal.org job, he also loves the outdoors, does lots of things outdoors, and he calls himself an amateur guitarist, which certainly I'll be interested to hear more about. So
I didn't bring my guitar today, so I can't play it.
Okay, all right. We won't have any dueling guitars. So so after an introduction, welcome, Josh. Thanks for taking the time to come with us, join us. And we have a number of questions for you, and also just want to chat about Drupal.org in general. The first thing I'd love to know is what falls under the umbrella of the things that you're responsible for as the CTO and things that are in your domain. So what kinds of things can you address for us today?
Well, there's kind of two parts of that, kind of what falls under Drupal.org. It's a pretty robust website. I don't know that as many users as we have of Drupal.org, most of them only know bits and pieces of it, so they don't always see the full kind of ecosystems of sites that make that up. There's about 16 production sites and services that are either a subdomain of Drupal.org or a service of Drupal.org that integrates in some way. And that's everything from Drupal.org proper, which is the projects, the issues, the profiles, quite a bit of our documentation, case studies, forums, marketplace, the Drupal Planet, which is kind of an aggregated environment that brings in blog posts from all over the web. There's things like qa.drupal.org, which is soon to be replaced by drupalci.org, and the testing infrastructure behind basically the infrastructure that allows all of our code to be tested upon commit And that commit part commits to our Git repositories. So we have a pretty robust Git infrastructure as well that we run and maintain. That's integrated through sites like the cgit installation we have that does the kind of a code browser, code reviewer at drupalcode.org. We have api.drupal.org, which is automated documentation that is produced directly from core code. So whenever someone documents something correctly in code, it automatically gets turned into documentation pages on api.drupal.org. We've got updates.drupal.org, which is what every installation of Drupal calls home to see if its modules are all up to date. Jobs.drupal.org, we've got drupalstore.org, we've got all the DrupalCon sites, we've got groups, we've got security, we've got localize. We actually host some archives of DrupalCon sites and Drupal camp sites on our infrastructure as well. And then we have a really robust dev and staging environment that allows us to do all the work on that. So as far as infrastructure goes, we've got quite a bit for an open source project that we run and maintain. Certainly compared to a lot of the newer open source projects that tend to try to farm a lot of that out to systems like GitHub and Travis CI and whatnot. We've built up quite the infrastructure over the years, and really up until a year ago, there were no more than 2 to 3 staff associated with the Drupal Association that were maintaining that with the help of a lot of really committed volunteers. And we've built up that staff over the last year. So I have 9 that report to me now, and do everything from DevOps to design to front-end development and kind of deployment to Drupal.org and its subsites. So it's really grown.
So are you still using free help or volunteer help to manage?
Oh yeah, absolutely. We have some core volunteers that I should be careful with the word using the word core. That's namespace conflict right there.
Right.
We have some really critical volunteers that jump in and help us out pretty regularly. Some on the infrastructure side, some more on the software side. And then because we follow the same process as any Drupal module, people can suggest a patch or can jump in and participate within the issue queues and help build Drupal.org that way. I will say it takes a lot of background knowledge to jump into some of the deeper integrations. So there's a little bit of a barrier to being able to open it up to everyone, but we like to think that anyone, if they're willing to learn all those things, can jump in and help us build Drupal.org.
So I'm curious about what you had just said about the sort of expansion. What prompted that massive expansion of people working on the site full time, or as under you, as you said?
Well, back in 2013 or so, whenever the Drupal Association was kind of transitioning into being a little bit more than just the producers of DrupalCons and becoming more of a nonprofit body that could really sustain Drupal the software project and Drupal.org, that's when things started shifting from being completely volunteer-based to being a kind of a combination where we would have contractors come in and they would do an extended project and they'd work on Drupal.org for a period of time. And that was the interesting thing is frequently we would have paid contractors that were being project managed by volunteer project managers because that was just the structure that was possible at the time with the funding and whatnot. And around that same time, we got a little bit better at our supporting partner programs. That the whole purpose behind the supporting partner programs is to make sure that we can support the infrastructure for Drupal.org and Drupal the software product. So that transition, we started making more money at about the same time that we were able to apply more resources. And because of that weird blend of volunteer project managers with paid contractors to get a particular thing done, it was realized that all of those projects were taking far too long to get done. And the solution that the board came up with at the time was to basically invest in ourselves and build up a technology team, a product and engineering team, for Drupal.org, so it could be treated like a real product and could have a little bit more knowledge share in terms of the number of people that were familiar with the very complex systems that make it up. So that transition started in the 2013 timeframe, and a lot of people pointed out the upgrade of Drupal.org from 6 to 7 was just a really painful process. It took a very long time. And the goal was that by building up staff, that wouldn't have to happen again. That sort of work could be more consistent and better supported. And so that budget was pulled together for basically starting 2014 with a CTO and building up a small but a dedicated team, a team that this is their day job. They do Drupal.org every day, day in, day out. So that shift took about a year.
I'm hearing Drupal.org is probably one of the bigger Drupal implementations. Is that true?
It is quite large. In terms of total traffic, some of the big media sites that exist out there, and certainly sites like whitehouse.com or .gov. Don't go to whitehouse.com.
Right.
They bought it, I think, recently. So
it's all safe now? Oh, good. I'm glad to hear that. That was awful for many people for years. It's one of the larger sites in terms of total traffic to the services. One of the numbers that I threw out in the Austin keynote and that everybody kind of latched onto was the 20 terabytes a month. We do basically around 13 terabytes of our traffic is to our updates server. So the 1.2, 1.3 million websites that run Drupal that are calling home to see, hey, am I up to date? Am I up to date? That's a huge amount of our traffic. If you look at the actual D.O traffic, just people looking at the content, that's probably another 3 terabytes.
Wow.
And then there's probably about 4 terabytes of people downloading things from our what used to be our FTP infrastructure. We still call it ftp.drupal.org, but ironically, it's all over HTTP right now. It's basically calling our CDN to do downloads. So poorly named, but still functional file transfer services. So that's roughly the breakdown, and that definitely represents one of the larger Drupal installations from just that amount of integration and the amount of traffic that is pushing back and forth. We also have a huge amount of total content compared to most Drupal sites. You'd have to be a pretty big content repository to top the 1.2 million issues that we have in the issue queues, and I think it's close to 2.4 million comments on Drupal.org.
Yeah,
I may be off on that number. I need to look it up again. I haven't read it recently.
Yeah, there's only one site I've seen that's come even close, and that was a social media type site that was marginally popular. But yeah, it's not not nearly as in depth as a lot of the stuff on Drupal.org. So.
A lot of content, and a lot of the other thing that's amazing about Drupal.org, most people don't realize, it has been continuously upgraded in place. It's never been migrated. It's always had an update script run that moved it from one version to the next. So as one of my DevOps people were saying the other day, they were like, it would be a lot easier to run a query on the Drupal.org databases if I didn't know that there were Drupal 4 tables still living in that database, because just continuously upgraded in place. And I really don't know of another example like that.
I think that's going to end for Drupal 8, isn't it, with the new migrate?
Yeah, that's. I actually think it's a great opportunity for us, because it'll give us an opportunity to really take a hard look at what our archival process is, and to purge some old content. Because while we have so many nodes of content, I would say a fair number of those are no longer
useful.
They're no longer useful. They're not the things that people are actually searching for. So there's really no reason for us to fill up the database with that. So
that actually brings up something that I've been curious about for a very long time with Drupal.org, and I'm curious if this is on the radar, and that's discoverability. One of the, like you said, there's all this stuff behind Drupal.org that makes Drupal Drupal. But a lot of people, sometimes it's difficult to find exactly what you're looking for. Either what, it took me, when I first started, I didn't really have a mentor at the time, so I was kind of floundering. But it took some time to find issue queues, and then it took some time to learn how to search that, and then a while to find the APIs. And is there some kind of is it on the radar to find out how to provide better discoverability?
There's two parts to that. One, there's work that we recently completed with Forum One and with some of our staff working on our content strategy, really rethinking what are the content types we have for Drupal.org, thinking about how those are organized, what our overall sitemap would look like, how do we show related content a little bit better, because pretty much right now the only relationships you would see are in those giant book menus, which are a pretty horrible UI experience. So that content strategy is really, as we work to implement that, it's going to kind of change the visual structure of certain content types, but it's also going to change the information architecture for the entire site in kind of a gradual way as we roll it out. The other piece to that, and it's one of our other priorities that we prioritized with the Drupal.org working groups. I can go into a little bit more detail about what those are. But we prioritized with them a set of initiatives that we were going to focus our staff on. And one of the initiatives that's on that list is really trying to improve the search experience. For anyone that's done a really large solar installation, they know that process of kind of tweaking the configuration of your solar environment is really important to get back the right results. And most people would be unsurprised to hear that Drupal.org basically has no customization of that configuration. It has a little bit in terms of weighting content types, but nothing with the stop words or the synonyms or the elevations, all the things that really give you excellent search results. That work hasn't been done yet. And we've recently documented what needs to be done there, and we're just trying to get it onto the plate of some of the developers as soon as their schedule opens up. But that'll help a lot.
Yeah, I imagine so. I also imagine that purging that search index isn't something that you want to do just on a whim.
You'll love this. It takes, I believe, the last time we did it, and we have faster database servers now. We have the burliest database servers I think I've ever seen. They're quite impressive. But the last time we had to rebuild the index, which, big solar indexes, it could take a few hours to get through. I think it took about 5 days for it to rebuild the index. So basically our strategy for rebuilding the Drupal.org index is to have a fallover index and to basically swap back and forth. Yeah. Let it run, let it build the index, and then we can swap to it after the content is kind of caught up after the fact. So,
could you give us an overview of the production environment architecture here? You just mentioned you have big burly database servers, but I assume you're running some caching servers and that kind of stuff. So, could you give us just an overview of that?
Yeah, there's a little bit of a summary on Drupal.org. We have a page called Drupal.org/ecosystem, and it kind of outlines everything. But our production environment, just to give people a sense of what it takes to have a production environment for all of those sites and subsites that are Drupal.org, we have currently 4 web nodes up and running that are running Apache, Varnish, PHP, FPM, Memcache, a lot of the standard things that you would do to really optimize that. We have, in front of that, we have 2 load balancers that are running Nginx. We have 2 file servers. We have 4 database servers, 2 of which are configured to be our production failovers, and those are the really big, burly ones that I think the current state is something like 800 gigs of solid state hard drives and 128 gigs of RAM, and it's amazing because what we've basically done is we've created these two amazingly big board servers because they have so much processing power that there's very little that slows down on them anymore, and that wasn't always the case. The ones we replaced were definitely a bottleneck to performance on Drupal.org. We have 2 Git servers in the Git infrastructure, 2 Solar Search servers. We have a utility server that does a lot of the, it's basically our Jenkins, our dispatch and deploy server that's part of our production environment. Mm-hmm. I mentioned that FTP was now through our CDN services. We use 2 different CDN services. We use Fastly for our updates traffic, so updates.drupal.org. Mm-hmm. And we also use Fastly for our FTP traffic, so whenever someone's downloading a file. For the primary D.O traffic, so if you're going to visit a page, you're hitting Edgecast servers, which is, I think in long term, we're probably going to move almost everything over to Fastly because they use some varnish technologies that, as their base, that might allow us to remove essentially our load balancers from the scenario and allow that service to be our load balancing service. And then we also, within our production environment, whenever you're looking at things like testing, all of our test bots are spun up in Amazon. And so we have basically an on-demand ability to scale up and scale down testing so that we can meet the needs of a sprint, or if there's just an increase in people submitting patches, we can respond to that. The rest of the production environment that's not in Amazon is all at the OSU Open Source Labs, so Oregon State University's Open Source Labs. There's quite a few other excellent open source projects that are being hosted out of there right now. And we're one of the bigger ones. Certainly, I believe the Apache Foundation would probably give us a run for their money in terms of the total amount, but no individual project of theirs is as large in terms of the total number of developers getting involved as Drupal is.
So, not to bog down in the details too much, but I'm curious about one thing. So each web node has Apache and Varnish on it. Does Varnish, so Varnish only speaks to one instance of Apache?
I don't know that answer off the top of my head, so
we can move on. We don't need to.
I would have to get you. See, this is the great thing. As CTO, I get to delegate that
exactly.
to a really awesome infrastructure manager who kind of takes care of all that and knows the details.
I knew as once we went down this path, Nick was going to be getting all anxious in his seat over there. So let's talk about some particular sections of the site that we had some interest in. And guys, we have an order on our notes here, but we don't need to go in this order. So, John, why don't you start with a particular thing that you were interested in getting some more information on?
Yeah. So the egg of this conversation was between Josh and I. Josh and I actually talked couple of weeks ago, and a lot of that talk was kind of a lot about what we're talking today. One thing that we did talk about was the Drupal.org marketplace and organization pages, and Oomph actually right after that call we went and we created our organization pages, and we had all of our employees add the organization to their profile and update their profiles, and then do a lot of the attribution of contributions to projects, so that the stats would start kind of updating on that organization page. But Josh, from your standpoint, can you just give us an overview of the marketplace page and you know where it's going to be going? I know in Dries' keynote in LA, he did have some screenshots of some new features that you guys were going to be rolling out.
Yeah, one that actually went live this past week on Saturday was you can now on an organization page see the issue credits that have been attributed to that organization. We've had the ability for people to do the attribution now for a few months, and now it's beginning to display the data that we've been collecting for the last couple of months, which is really exciting because it opens up kind of a world of possibility for how we use the marketplace to really highlight the organizations that are contributing the most to Drupal and making that happen. So in short, the marketplace was conceived as it's a place for Drupal shops to say that they work on Drupal. There's a community process for getting approval to show up in the marketplace. There's a community process for being a featured organization on the marketplace. It was very much designed as a process so that the community would help identify the people that were contributing, and then they would show up. One of the things that we're going to be doing to kind of shift that a bit is we're going to be using real data going forward rather than completely just a vetting process where it's subjective and people need to make a decision. We'll be able to see, oh, okay, well, you created an organization page. At the point that you have this many issue credits, we can promote you to a certain level in the marketplace. The other thing that we can begin doing is figuring out what is the algorithm that we want to use for choosing the order of things in the marketplace. Issue credits is going to be a huge part of that, but we also have things like con and camp sponsorships that we want to be able to highlight. We want to be able to show the people who are contributing to Drupal.org financially, because obviously that's a huge thing for us, and being able to make it a sustainable long-term solution for delivering Drupal the software. There's other things that we might be able to tweak in there as well in terms of, you know, did you hire a core committer? Well, if you hired a core committer, maybe we tweak the algorithm a little bit to show you a little bit higher in the list as well, because those are the organizations that we want to give the most visibility to because of what they're doing for Drupal. So those are the kind of those are the main things that kind of make up the marketplace right now. Some changes that we're looking to make. Right now, organization pages are owned by a single person. We're looking to make organizations, as part of the content strategy, we're going to be implementing organic groups on Drupal.org, which does increase the complexity of the code base for Drupal.org. But the payoff will be in the ability to have a little bit better content governance as it surrounds things where, you know, a group of people own a piece of content, or they're the maintainer for a section of the site. And one of the things that this will really help with are organization pages, because they can become an organic group. You can have multiple people that are responsible for maintaining it. You'll be able to create case studies that are the child of that organic group, which it opens up some possibility in terms of interlinking back to the companies that help do a particular website and being able to highlight that in a meaningful way. It really opens up a ton of options for being able to show that information on user profiles as well, if the relationship is a little bit stronger than what it currently is. The relationship right now is it's a text match. We look at the name that you put on your profile and we see if there's an organization that has that exact same pattern, and then we associate them. So if you make the mistake of putting Inc. at the end of or LLC or anything like that, and your org page didn't have that, it wouldn't map the two of them together, which is we want to get away from that and make it a little bit more intuitive.
Do you find the marketplace to be an effective tool for people trying to engage with Drupal agencies?
I think right now what you'll see is companies that are in the know will go through the process of vetting just to make sure that the company they're hiring has a Drupal.org profile, that they have a certain number of employees. They'll be looking at, you know, how much do those employees contribute to Drupal, because that's kind of an indicator of whether or not that company actually knows their stuff. But I'm going to say that that's probably a minority of the people that are interested in Drupal that are going out. We have much better word of mouth impact. let's face it, the fact that the White House moved to Drupal a few years back, that helped quite a few people sell to larger organizations, because it was good enough for the White House, it's good enough for you. And they didn't have to be the ones who did the White House project, it's just being able to point to that. So I think the big case studies did more for being able to sell Drupal into more organizations than the marketplace itself. But it definitely has a place, both in the process of picking a vendor, but also in picking an employer. I think it's probably used even more by people who want to either get hired as a Drupal developer or are moving towards moving from one Drupal shop to another. They're checking the org profiles to make sure that the company is involved in the community. So I think that's, some companies can, we just know their name because of their place in the Drupal ecosystem. But there's a lot of really awesome companies that you wouldn't know it unless you went to Drupal.org and looked at their profile and dug a little bit more into what they've been involved in.
And they don't. I mean, to your point on doing some of your ranking of companies, the marketplace doesn't really highlight them at all. Like even when you go to the marketplace today, if you start your company name with 111, you're going to be at the top of the list.
Exactly. I think our current top of the list is a company called 2-Bit.
Yeah.
2-Bit, which they're a great company. They do some great work. But that the way that they get to the top should not be because they just chose the right name. Alphabetical is probably not the best way to present that information.
Right.
So, Josh, one thing you touched on, right now, the curation of featured organizations is done manually. Is that correct?
It's a community process. So you basically, on your org, when you're creating the org page, there's a button near the top of it that says if you want to get your organization featured, click here, and it takes you to an issue that's pre-populated with some information and asks you to fill it out a bit more. And that issue is what kicks off the process for getting promoted or not promoted.
And what does featured mean?
It's kind of interesting because basically what it does is it adds you to the marketplace list. If you're not featured, you basically don't show up.
We're actually working on that right now. I have a ticket in there, so I was just curious as to how that's being.
Well, if it doesn't get responded to quickly enough, let me know. Because
it's been out there for a while.
We need to. It's a process we need to improve, and I do think it needs to become something that's automatic, based on you have 5 confirmed employees and you have contributed X amount, then your organization should just appear. It shouldn't be this subjective process to figure that out. We've got some great data to make it happen.
It's going on 21 days now.
21 days. That's not acceptable. Those are the things we need to improve for the community, right? We need to apply the processes that
to be fair,
you have the ability to do.
To be fair, the initial listing went through very quickly.
Okay.
So to shift gears a little bit and speak about process a bit more, one of the things that I interact with almost daily, or at the very least weekly, on Drupal is with the project module. With the issue queue, with submitting patches. So I'm curious about that whole process and if anything has been looked at there. I know that, for example, a lot of projects are jumping ship, so to speak, going to GitHub for not so much for the issue piece, but more for the pull requests and that kind of management. And while I think they lose a lot of really big things there. I think they lose the automated testing. I mean, there's a lot of stuff that they're losing. I'm curious if there's anything in the works around providing some kind of pull request type functionality to the issue queue.
There absolutely is. So the developer on my team that's going to be focused on that work is currently doing quite a bit of work on Drupal Ci. So as soon as we can get that testing infrastructure work wrapped up and productionized. The next thing he's going to be turning his attention to is it's a feature of Git that came out middle of last year called Git workspaces or Git namespaces. And so what a Git namespace will allow us to do is to basically create, well, to create a namespace, but it's kind of like a branch in Git, but allows us to do that per issue and even per issue per user in the issue, which will allow us to create a UI that will allow for essentially issue workspaces. So when you fire up the issue, instead of going through a patch workflow, we would give you a little Git shortcut that would say, okay, create your own branch, do the work you want to do, and then submit that back. And when you submit that back, it would be essentially like a pull request, because you'd be saying, hey, here's something that I would recommend. The difference, and this is a pretty significant difference that took us down this path rather than moving towards GitHub and doing GitHub specifically. GitHub is very much a fork and fracture. Every time you fork a project on GitHub, there's an opportunity that you can submit pull requests back to the canonical project, but just as easily one of those forks could become the canonical project just by becoming more popular than the main branch. On Drupal.org, like our whole security infrastructure, the review of modules, everything is about having a canonical version that we know is the canonical version, and our entire workflow around issues is kind of a swarm mentality. It's like, oh, here's a problem, lots of people come in and work on the common problem within a common space. And that's a little bit different than the GitHub model. I have some opinions about which is better for the Drupal community right now. I think long term, GitHub could be a direction that we end up going down the road, but right now I think the better result for us would be to just have a better solution for a pull request-like capability that was more integrated into the issue queues, that allowed us to continue using issue queues as a way to give credit in the community and tie back that kind of big social network that is Drupal. There's some tools to do it in the GitHub space, but they're not quite as robust, and they kind of assume you're going to move all your code into this this repository that's no longer your project's repository. It's the GitHub repository. So a lot of our integrations would have to be completely rethought to go down that path.
Yeah. To be clear, I'm not recommending that people move to GitHub or asking if there's plans for that. It was more because I think one of the barriers to entry is you do finally get people that are submitting patches, but they're not doing on head, or they don't quite know how to create the patch correctly, and then you finally get something that's working, and then there's really no. You just have to wait for the module maintainer to
respond.
To respond, and while pull request doesn't necessarily solve that completely, I think it takes a lot of the pain away on the front end. It makes it a lot easier for the module maintainer to just say, okay, this is good, I'm going to merge this in and go from there.
The nice thing too is we can do some automation in this space. So there's a certain number of tests that we can run against a patch whenever it's submitted to the Drupal.org infrastructure. We could basically vet it, and if it passes, change its status to something that basically gives us an indicator that the maintainer should do something. And we can give notifications to that maintainer that they should do something with the module that's there, and then they can make the decision about what they do or don't do. But there's some possibilities for automation in that process that we haven't been able to take advantage of that we're really looking forward to digging into and making a part of that Drupal.org workflow, because the patch process is painful, and it's a huge burden for new users. Definitely a blocker to new contributors coming into the space.
That's certainly very exciting.
There's a great. I'm trying to remember the title of the issue, but if you want kind of a summary of what is being looked at as kind of the first stage of that. There is an issue, it's a meta issue, a plan. We haven't changed its name yet because we recently introduced a new issue type of plan. So,
oh, really?
Yeah, the idea is that way we can actually search for all the plans in the issue queues rather than searching for the word meta in the title. This actually gives us some classification. But The name of the issue is Improve Git Workflow on Drupal.org by Implementing Issue Workspaces. Node 2488266.
So a few minutes ago, related to this, a few minutes ago you mentioned Drupal Ci. Could you talk a little bit about what that initiative is about?
Yeah, so CI stands for Continuous Integration. It's kind of our answer to Travis CI. A lot of people have said, hey, why aren't you guys just using Travis CI or some hosted solution? There's Solana Labs, and there's a whole slew of CI solutions. Actually, one of my favorite ones is Magnum Ci. Not because I know if it's any good, but I like their logo. It has a Tom Selleck-looking character on it. I just thought that was an awesome name. But the continuous integration testing needs for Drupal core are pretty extensive. Every time a commit happens for Drupal 8, there's 94,000 assertions, there may be more by now, that are run against that code base to see if it passes. Mm-hmm. That takes either A, really big beefy servers running those tests, or B, it takes a long time to get through. And time is one of those things where our current test bots, we've got them down. For a while, they were running the system that's there right now. They were running it, I think, about an hour and a half. We've got test bot execution time down to like the 30-minute range. It's dipped as low as 20-minute range at a couple times, but 30 minutes is kind of our target that we want to get under. Because you kick off a test, you want to get your results as quickly as you can. The Drupal Ci project had a lot of great volunteers that were moving it along over the last couple of years towards being something that, instead of using a completely Drupal-based solution like qa.drupal.org is, it uses some of the best-in-class solutions for doing automated testing. So we're using Jenkins to dispatch the Docker containers that have the environments, and then the tests are run on those Docker containers. And so we know it can be very, very consistent testing, and it can respond back. And then as we've been doing the work most recently, we've also been making it something that can auto scale. I mentioned that we could scale up or scale down our current test bot environment on Amazon. That's a manual process right now where we have to choose to fire up more test bots, and it takes a few minutes to set each of those up every time we do it. They also can be kind of expensive because they don't turn themselves off whenever they hang. And the new Drupal Ci test bots that are being fired off, one, they're a little bit smarter about actually killing themselves if they get hung on a test and that test has really failed and it needs to be reported back as failed. But two, if we see there's not enough test bots to handle the load of the testing that we have coming in, it can auto scale up more test bots as well. So it's a complicated environment. There's lots of ways to tackle testing. We had a huge number of volunteers that were really passionate about this. We actually brought them out to our offices at the Drupal Association in March as one of the Drupal 8 Accelerate grants. Mm-hmm. They came out, did a huge sprint here on site, made a lot of great progress, and then the last month or so has really been kind of shifting it to what are the things we need to do to go ahead and make it production. And
how far away is that?
We're really close. There are tests that are actually showing up on core right now. So if you were to go to drupal.org/project/Drupal, mm-hmm. There's an automated testing button that's available to, I can't remember how extensive we have the permissions set right now, but there's this ability for at least core maintainers right now to go in and see the new tests that are being run against the new system. Yeah. We have a couple things like notifications that we need to finalize. There's a little bit of the test output that need to be finalized a little bit, but we're within a couple weeks of being able to make that available for all modules on Drupal.org, all projects, to be able to have that automated testing system and write their own tests against it.
So that 30-minute window that you were discussing, when you move this to production, how far below that 30-minute window are you going to be able to get to?
It probably won't drop too much from that. I mean, keep in mind this is core testing. If you're running a test on a smaller module that you've written for your module, it could be a couple minutes, more like Travis CI timelines. The size servers and whatnot that we're using for core testing, you can probably get it down to like the 20-minute time frame. As we continue to improve upon it, there's some options for concurrent testing. So we might be able to say, instead of run all these tests sequentially, we might be able to say, here, this server take these tests, this server take these tests, this server take these tests. That could drop that time frame even further. But anytime you have 94,000 assertions that you're testing, you're going to have, it's going to take a while to plow through it. You can only lower that so much. And it's the real reason why we haven't been able to look at some of the hosted services out there is the cost of running it through them to do a private version of Travis CI, which also requires GitHub integration, which was another blocker to doing it. The cost to doing that privately was going to be a little bit too excessive. The reality is we could, relook at that if we're seeing that the performance of Drupal CI isn't what we need it to be once that has launched publicly. But we're very hopeful now that it's kind of moved into that productionizing phase. It took a lot of volunteer engineering time to get it to where it's at. But the thing that we really have noticed over the last few weeks is as we shift it to be something where we're working at making it on production hardware, that changes kind of the pace of things, because instead of it being at each big sprint that's held throughout the year, it's, I've got 2 people that are spending the better part of their day every day working on Drupal CI to get it across the finish line.
So we're talking about this automated testing just for core. It's not. It's separate from the test bots that are testing patches or releases for modules, correct? But eventually, it's going to be integrated with those as well.
Yeah, it would replace that automated testing for Contrib as well as core.
Okay.
We rolled it out for core first because our biggest concern right now is getting Drupal 8 out the door, and testing is a huge part of that. But long term, it could be, or it will be available for every single module. You have to write the tests in your module, and then it's kind of cool. You get to pick the environments and whether you want it to test on commit or whether you want it to test once daily, because maybe your module, you only care about testing SQLite once a day, but you want to test PHP 5.5 and MySQL 5.5 every commit because you want to see if something breaks immediately. So we've got some cool things coming in that space in terms of being able to really have a robust testing environment for all of the Drupal projects that are out there, Contrib and core.
Josh, what would you say, like any things you have coming down the road from Drupal.org that you'd like our listeners to know about or pay attention to? What would those things be?
Well, as we're rolling out that content strategy I was talking about earlier, one of the big shifts is by putting organic groups into the Drupal.org build. It gives us the ability to take some of that functionality that's on groups.drupal.org right now and shift it to be a part of Drupal.org, which could be significant because it means we start getting to do things like say, here are all the groups you belong to as part of your Drupal.org profile, and pulling all that into one place. We can start looking at things like, oh, well, we know your location because you told us where your location was when you were setting up your account, and we can recommend that, hey, you might be interested in the following groups. These local user groups are near you, that sort of thing. So there's some real possibility in terms of taking that community function of groups.drupal.org and bringing it into Drupal.org and making it all a much deeper integration than what we've had in the past. So that's one thing that's coming down the pipe. There's some great information on that on the roadmap page at drupal.org/roadmap. The other thing I think that it's not something that's coming. It's something that's already here, but I think it still has room to grow. Is Drupal Jobs. This has been a huge success out the gate. Financially, it's not earth-shattering, the amount of revenue that it brings to the association, but it fills a need to have really professional-looking job board with some great functionality that allows companies to connect with the people that are their market. They want these great Drupal developers, and so we have on average 200, 220, 230, somewhere in that range, open job postings at any given time on Drupal Jobs, and that's been really kind of a huge success story of showing possibility there. And every company that posts a job there, they're also, the money that goes into Drupal Jobs is being spent on improving Drupal Jobs, but also going back into kind of the larger Drupal.org ecosystem and making sure we can continue to make that sustainable. So it's kind of an awesome mission-based way for us to bring in a little bit of revenue and fill a need for the community. So
one of the things I've wondered about Jobs, the job site, is do jobs disappear after a certain period of time, or does someone have to pull them down? Because I've responded to a few things in the past, and I've seen that it appears that they may be outdated or they've already been filled. I was wondering how that process works.
The default is 30 days. So whenever somebody buys a job, they're even if they use one of the coupons that come out fairly regularly, the job should stay up for 30 days and 30 days only. If it fills in 14 days, it's the responsibility of the poster to mark it as done and to take it down, basically.
So you're tracking the success rate of postings, I imagine?
Anecdotally, yes. One of the things we didn't build in, we took more of the post it and forget about it approach that of, say, like Craigslist, rather than building in the complexity of people being able to apply to the job in Drupal Jobs, which would give us the ability to say, oh, well, this many people applied to this job, and this is how successful it was. Anecdotally, we are following up with companies and saying, hey, how well did Drupal Jobs perform, doing some surveys to people that have posted. We've gotten some great feedback. There's actually a video that we made of a company while we were at DrupalCon Los Angeles, and they were saying that they had just this huge number of qualified candidates within a very short period of time whenever they posted to Drupal Jobs. And so I don't want to throw out a number because whatever I throw out would undoubtedly be wrong, but it was really impressive, and they were excited about it. They were excited about the momentum that it gave them in bringing people on. Some people haven't had as good a luck. I mean, that's the case with any job board. Is sometimes you're going to hit it out of the park, and sometimes you won't. Yeah. And that can be as much how the job post is written as anything else. And so we've thought about offering like services to help people write good Drupal job posts. Surprisingly bad how bad some of those can be. So I'm not surprised some of them don't perform well based on just how they were written. But it has been a success, and it continues to grow, which has been something fun to watch.
Very cool.
Okay, well, we're wrapping up with our time. It's been close to an hour, so let's move to our module of the week before we close out the show here. Nick, I think you posted this into our notes here. Highcharts. Highcharts. Charts?
Charts. Okay. So okay. Highcharts is the module of the week this week. Highcharts is a JavaScript library that allows you to create exactly what it sounds like, charts. Most people use Google Charts or something else, but I had a particular project that is integrating with a rather large existing software product across several different websites and offline, and their standard is Highcharts, so I had to look into that to see if it was viable. There's a nice little module that integrates the Highcharts library with Drupal. and it's so far fantastic. It gives you the ability to do any kind of chart that I can think of that's imaginable, from gauges to donuts to pies to line charts to stacked column charts. And it's a fairly robust API. Works on mobile as well. So it's pretty much anything you could ask for. And their documentation is some of the best documentation I've seen. Highcharts itself, not necessarily the helper module. But whenever you're integrating with a library, you're looking at the library's documentation. So it's fantastic.
So, Nick, are you using this mostly from the API interface or the views integration?
I'm using it from the API. So
Okay.
I'm manipulating fairly large amounts of data that's not available to views. So I haven't looked at the views integration, but supposedly it exists, but I haven't used it.
Okay. If you had a link you could share with samples that you've done, that'd be great. Stick them in the notes. I suspect you don't, but
I cannot, unfortunately.
All right. Okay. Well, Josh, thank you for joining us today. Time flies when we have someone like you on. We probably had a ton more questions we could get to, but where would you recommend people going to either reach out to you or to learn more about Drupal.org? And I'm guessing it would be Drupal.org, but maybe you could give us some of that information.
Kind of circular logic. It's a bit of a recursion. Yeah, well, definitely on Drupal.org, there's a section called about.drupal.org. It's linked from the footer. In there, you'll find a link to the roadmap. We're updating that quarterly to give people a sense of what the team is focusing on, what the Drupal.org working groups are prioritizing. I would definitely, go there, and my contact form on Drupal.org is also a great way to reach out to me. I'm in IRC sporadically. I'm not always in, but I'm Joshua Wami there as well. And then on Twitter, I'm Joshua_IO if you're wanting to reach out to me that way.
And all that information will be in our show notes for anyone looking for it later. Is there any last notes or tips you'd like to give us before we close out? Update
your profiles. The data on the community is only as good as the data that's provided. So take a little bit of time every so often, a couple times a year at least, to make sure your organization and individual user profiles are up to date. It helps us because it gives us good data to make sure that we're doing the right things that the community needs. So.
Great. That's great advice. I know that preparing for the show, some of us have started to do that.
Nice.
So, John Picozzi, where can people find you, and do you have anything coming up you'd like to share with the group?
Next thing for me is actually Drupal PVD, which is coming up on July 14th.
In Providence?
Is the date. Yeah, it's going to be in Providence. At the UMFINC offices, so that's the local Providence meetup. So if you're in the area and you want to stop on by, we'll be there. There'll be drinks and some snacks, and you can hear Steve talk about CDNs, and I'm going to do a little recap on a translation site that I've been working on. So that's going to be a good time.
And more information about that would be, you could go to Meetup, I think at meetup.com. You could search for Drupal PVD there, or go to drupalpvd.org for the details.
That is correct.
And that meetup, excellent. How about you, Nick?
You can find me online at Nixman pretty much everywhere, and I'm going to try to make it out to Drupal PVD since I missed the Boston meetup last week. They had it on a different week, and although I'm going to be in Malden, so it's going to be a bit longer drive than normal, so we'll see. But yeah, if you have any questions about the show, at Nixman.
Nick, you could always come early and go to the Lego store at the mall too, right?
Yes, I could. I don't know if Josh noticed in the background, we've got the Drupal logo built in Lego.
Nice. I like that.
All right, Josh, thank you again for joining us, and I'm Stephen Cross. I can be found at Stephen Cross on Twitter or parallaxinfotech.com. for my company website. And take care, guys. Talk to you soon.
Thanks much.